we've captured it all. And as always, I suppose we do put the material up on the YouTube, which is amazing when you go back and look at it after a few weeks. It's amazing how many people have watched it again. So that's quite good. Everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, the Rural Voices Seminar Series. This is our 20th seminar, I think. So we're a little while on the road. As always, we want to thank the Department of Rural and Community Development, who have partnered with us in relation to this, I suppose, to the Rural Voices Seminar Series. So we're delighted, as always, to have them as part of this. And we're delighted to have all of you to join us at the end of every month. So thank you very, very much. This particular seminar, again, a really, really interesting. Smart Villages has become part, I suppose, increasingly part of our conversation around rural development, around the LEADER program, around the CAP strategic plans on a European perspective as well as within an Irish perspective. So it's really interesting, and we're absolutely thrilled today to have Adina Usk, because Adina I met many years ago. I think it must be over 10 years ago, Adina, at this stage. Adina used to work with the European Network for Rural Development, and a super voice among them, and an absolute wonderful person when it comes to anything to do with ideas around rural. Again, a Hungarian national, and she's an expert really in relation to regional, social and rural development, and has worked for many, many years in the area. And a number of years ago, she did go out on her own with her own company, and since then has had some fantastic work completed in relation to smart communities, smart villages, and all of the area that she's going to talk and tell us about today. So we're absolutely delighted to have Adina among us and to explain and tell us all about the work that she's done. So thank you, Adina, and we'll hand the floor over to you.
Hi, everyone, and thanks a lot for joining in such a great number. I'm really pleased, and thanks for the invitation, Maura, for this session. So let me straight share a presentation, because it also contains a bit of introduction to what I'm trying to talk about today. So here I am in a different capacities, I would say, and I will talk about that a bit. But as Maura introduced me, we've been coordinating recently 2 EU-funded projects you might have heard about, and apologies in advance, I can see familiar faces, so that was expected. And of course, many of you might know a lot about what I'm talking about, so sorry if it's something that you already know. But anyways, we've been coordinating these 2 projects, Smart Rural 21, which already finished, and Smart Rural 27, which is about to finish in a few months' time, essentially. And both of these are supported by the European Commission. But we are also animators of the so-called Smart Village Network. You can see the logo in the right bottom corner of that network. I will, if time allows, I will talk about that a bit as well, like what we are doing within the network. But I thought to share with you a bit more about what we've done in the projects, and maybe a bit about future plans. Let's see how we get on with time. So Effort is a small consultancy company. As Maura said, I used to work more as an independent individual expert, but then we wanted to start something new, and started to cooperate with different people, especially local communities, and start to apply for projects ourselves. But the main motivation to do that was really that we felt that many of the big EU projects or programs really get a bit distanced from the local people, or it's really not that easy and obvious to engage different rural people and local communities in these activities, or it's always the usual suspects and so on. And we saw a number of disillusioned people, or only those coming all the time who came to previous events. And then we thought that we will try to implement projects differently, because this is what we believed in, that every kind of project can be brought back to the ground, to the people, if we pay enough attention. And that somehow even over the years, over, I would say, past 5+ years now, that still remains kind of the key mission that we are trying to complete when we work with the different projects. So this is also how we try to implement the Smart Rural project. And there are a few things I would like to talk about, and let's see how far we get on the list. So firstly, I want to talk very, very briefly about the concept, like what we mean by it, but I'm sure most of you know this by now. Then I will tell you about the specific projects, the Smart Rural projects, and what we do in those. I thought it might be interesting, especially for local community or leader representatives, but also for others, some examples of the smart villages that we came across, and maybe some of the most inspiring ones. Some tools that we developed and you might be able to use in your own work if you work with the Smart Villages concept, and maybe a bit about the Smart Village Network or what we are doing there. So I could talk about these for very long, but I will try to keep it short. Those who know me, they know I can talk quite a lot. So so the Smart Villages concept, probably a lot of you know that there has been some now, quite a few, 7 years ago almost, an EU action for smart villages, and this has been signed, and maybe that's one of the key things I want to come back at the end as well, that this has been signed by several EU commissioners. So somehow the smart villages concept always meant to be a multi-funded concept, and I think sometimes we forgot this a bit, or it's really hard to make a breakthrough just as well, like with multi-funded CLLD, but this is still very important. And then it was a very attractive concept immediately, and there was, maybe some of you were members of the ENRD thematic group on smart villages. And later there was the pilot study which tried to define smart villages, which was followed by some capacity building, again, supported by the European Commission, which is the first and the second preparatory actions. So again, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this definition, which came at the EU level, and it's quite important that this is not an obligatory definition of smart villages. This was somehow a recommendation, and many criticism came up that it's too generic, it's too encompassing. Of course, it is. It won't tell you precisely maybe what smart villages are, but what we've been trying over the years is somehow translate these key notions which appear in this definition into practice. So for instance, how you select villages, when you select them, what do you consider a smart solution, at which geographical level you act. So there are hints in the definition about that, because at the end of the day, it's about the very local communities. So for instance, that's something that slightly distinguishes it from leader lags, which operate at a higher geographical level. It's about really some kind of innovation, smart solution, something which is inspiring for others. It's quite an important thing that it somehow should build on local strategies, so some vision, smart village strategies of communities, and also implemented through the participatory approach, which is of course very similar to the leader concept again. And over the years, what became clear that digital technologies is crucial, but it's not the only mean. It's just a means, and that's not the end in itself, which I'm sure you heard many times being told, but it really proved to be true. And I will show some examples, like how we dealt also with that. So this is a graphic I prepared very, very long ago when we started to work, and when I still had time to do such things. Nowadays I don't, but when I tried to explain how the smart villages evolved, and I've got a few graphics like this. But this was at the time to show that even we have the definition, people are still often struggle to understand what we are talking about. And these are typical questions which you see on the screen that come up. And I think we are maybe slightly closer to be able to answer these questions, but not yet fully there. So I might not be able to answer, for instance, myself, all of them. So in certain ways, these key questions are somehow still valid, and happy to discuss after the presentation as well, or later, but also during the presentation, how we deal with this. So these are some of the questions that I will touch upon in the presentation also today. So about the Smart Rural projects, we had Smart Rural 21, which already finished at the end of 22. And we have now Smart Rural 27. But as I said, this is also running out. And the Smart Rural 21, there was considerable overlap between the two projects, almost 2 years. I think it was, to be honest, a bit too much between two technical assistance projects, because we were still well into Smart Rural 21 when Smart Rural 27 started. It's important that these were totally independent contracts, and we were lucky kind of to get both one as a company, Forty, to get in partnership with others. But of course, because it's both supported by the European Commission, it created an opportunity to create synergies between them. So the Smart Rural 21 started with supporting villages and towards the end formulated policy recommendations, whereas Smart Rural 27 also kind of started with identifying and mapping smart villages at the time, but the main focus has been to prepare member states for smart villages policy support. So there was kind of an overlap between the two, but one evolved from the other. So in that sense, the Smart Rural 21 project was really a bottom-up project. And I have to say, and for instance, Pat is here, who've been partnering this. And I think we all very much enjoyed working with this project, because it's been really it's been all about supporting communities and directly working with them and trying to find, what they need the most and how we can support those activities the best. And we always try to mobilize expertise, not just from the partnership or those who won the contract, but also from different experts that were needed to support these communities. And of course, a lot of exchange of experience and visits and so on took place during that project. So over the years, I think we managed what we set out for at the beginning, that we really want to work closely with communities and be able to listen to what they need and not just focus on implementing a project for the Commission. And this I won't go into details, but this has been somehow at the time of the journey of the project. It's an infographic which started, you can see in the middle, with supporting. We increased the number because we got a huge number of applications to be part of the project, 730 plus, and we had to select very few across Europe. So we supported these communities, but on the way we kept engaging many, I would say hundreds of other communities, so that we don't leave them behind. And there has been a series of support actions, from helping to develop them strategies, to visit other villages, to organize so-called Smart Village Academy meetings, and then develop specific strategies for the villages and support them in smart actions. Because the time is short, I won't go into all of these, but I will come back to some of the outputs. But this has been one of the main outputs. And of course, for you, the other language versions might not matter that much, but this has been kind of a summary, this guidebook on how to become a smart village, which contains some of the key lessons that we came up with at the time. From some of the key questions that we just discussed, we try to synthesize those into these different chapters and put in some further resources. So this you can download from the website and look at it if you'd like. But then the Smart Rural 27 project is much more focused on policy. And I have to say that in policy terms, we feel that it's much harder to reach a breakthrough or to convince people that communities need more funding and need more direct support. I think those who work in LEADER must be familiar with this kind of struggles, that maybe these bottom-up, locally led initiatives often don't get enough attention or funding even from the CAP. So the purpose was somehow to try to work with policymakers and different stakeholders at different levels. So in this project, we also had the task, and I will quickly go through these things, to set up a so-called Smart Villages Observatory. This has been a pilot, but it still has been a very interesting experience. It's still an open question how this will continue. But essentially, it had 3 legs. And again, I encourage you, if you are interested in any of those, to go back to the resources. So first, we wanted to continue to work with communities. So these are the so-called knowledge clusters. And then we talk to communities, which are the key topics they want to exchange on. And there were two main topics. One is renewable energy, and the other one is digital services. So these are the two key themes where we set up so-called knowledge clusters, specifically focused on rural communities. So only local villages, communities, or towns are members of this. And then we had smart villages task forces in different countries. And actually, we just initiated one in Ireland. And I think I will ask Pat to say in a minute a few words, maybe 2 words about that, because Pat is working also as a national expert for Ireland. So I will take the opportunity to let him, because I was hoping he would be here to say a few words about that. And then we have these so-called stakeholder platforms, where we try to facilitate at the European level exchange between those who have the same concern. So for instance, managing authorities working with smart villages, CAP networks working, including the smart villages. And we also had a leader platform. Actually, we are having the second meeting online of this today, tomorrow morning. So if anyone has a chance who is from here and interested in how Leader is supporting smart villages, it will be dedicated to leader groups. So let me know and I will send you, or I will maybe paste the link at the end, the registration link here. So these were the 3 legs we worked with, and that's how somehow shaped into this European Smart Villages Observatory. And of course, there are interlinks between these different stages. So maybe, Pat, maybe you can say about a few words about the National Task Force in Ireland and what you're planning to do in the remaining months, and then I will take back, because it's best from you, I think.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep it short. So we got a little delayed setting up the task force in Ireland compared to some of the other countries, but we partnered with the CAP network themselves, in particular, to try and to assemble it. So we had our first meeting on that about a couple of weeks ago, and the focus was primarily on national level representatives. So we had people from like SCAI, Open Data Ireland, and a number of different other organizations who work with communities in different manner. So really what we're trying to do, we have a relatively short space of time, so we're really trying to ask a couple of key questions. Is there a need for a kind of a long-term task force in smart villages in Ireland? And do the participants see a value in that? And then if there is that, what would be the objectives of that task force? And the key part we're looking at is obviously getting a definition, looking how smart villages relates to a variety of different programs that are underway in Ireland, so tidy towns and smart or sustainable energy communities and so on. We're looking at how the smart village, or considering, do we need to think how smart villages relates to smart regions or clusters of smart villages? We're looking to see how would national level strategies transpose down into regional and local levels. So see, is there interoperability between local, regional and national strategies? In particular, we're also kind of conscious, and the last discussion was on smart villages is a growing concept. Smart cities is a well-established concept, but so much of the population in Ireland lives in that kind of peri-urban, very large towns close to a big city, and do the concepts all align? So do smart cities and villages align with that as well? And then looking at how that interprets different themes, so biodiversity, energy, mental health, and so on. So they were and obviously the last part then was just the open data. There's a lot of data out there, but how is that data turned into information that helps communities make better decisions? So that's some of the parts we're trying to kind of define out as an objective of the task force, if it was to get legs further. And a few people talking about how it could last after Smart Rural 27. So that's a very brief summary.
Thanks a lot, and I'm really glad you could tell that here, because exactly. So this is what we are trying to do in each country. It's different how we can support smart villages, but the idea is to start a dialogue which will have practical implications in the national policy context, hopefully, and some influence. And of course, it's a good kind of brand to do it under Smart Role 27, where the Commission is also following and is aware. So we are doing this in some 9 or 10 countries where there has been interest. So this is some of the key information. So if you, for instance, want to find out about what the knowledge clusters are doing, what the Smart Villages Task Force are doing, or what have been the results of the European stakeholder platforms such as LEADER, you can look it up here on the website. We are also doing a CAP analysis. I will come back to that. And we've got a Smart Communities database. Again, I will show that how it looks. And a resources database. So these are the key parts which you find on the website and you can delve into if you are more interested. So with that, I would like to switch a bit to some examples of smart villages. I have to come back and maybe I tell you how we translated different components of the definition or how it might be translated into practical features. So of course, smartness is somehow, I think, the hardest to pin down because, as I said at the beginning, it becomes quite obvious that digital is not the only way, or it's rather a tool, and there are other ways to become smart than technological digital innovation. And of course, social innovation comes up very often in that context. But of course, if it's not digital and if we don't set it as a criteria, let's say a project or community should work with that topic, then it can get a bit vague because everybody's then might ask themselves, like, what is it then? So we try to capture it in a way that must be, of course, some kind of innovation, something new, a new process or product, but mostly process, which then has a social impact somehow on the whole community. So it's not just for a benefit, for instance, a technological company or a few stakeholders in a community, but somehow it's an innovation with a wider social impact and an impact on the whole community and changing the life of the community somehow in the longer run. Of course, it still doesn't specify it fully, but this is kind of the direction if we try to say that it's not just digital. The other is what is a village, and we don't have a precise definition, and I think we don't need to stuck with that. I think it was Ireland, one of the key countries where people were not really happy with the village concept because you are talking much more about towns, or as Pat was saying, there are much more linkages between urban and rural areas in many ways. So village, I think we tend to use it just as the smart villages. It's a nice sounding concept, but it's not just villages. We increasingly use the wording local rural communities or rural communities because that can encompass many more different kind of areas. But the idea is that it's really should be a rural or as Pat was saying, some kind of peri-urban according to this Deburga classification at the very local level. And there is no sharp limit in population. The villages we worked with somehow ranged from 18, so the tiniest village, and mostly maybe a few thousand people, never really more than 10,000. So this is just an indication of the villages we have worked with. Then what's kind of important, and we think it's increasingly important, is some kind of strategic approach. And again, many people are freaking out when they hear, like, why do we need yet another strategy at a local level? So people don't like to hear that. And that's absolutely normal. And I think it's fine. So the idea is not to have another plan or paper or, a formal strategy. And we are trying to tell that to the Commission and the managing authorities. It's somehow not the format that matters. What matters, though, that we see the most inspiring villages are those who really have a vision somehow. So they are not just funding driven and apply for one project or another, but somehow they have this broader vision of where they want to get in 5-10 years time. And I think encouraging villages to think in the longer term, what they want to change or what is their main goal, and then move to like which kind of projects or smart projects can support that is really an important part, and also something that leader groups schools could tell and teach local communities, we believe. So the Smart Village strategies, which is also the indicator in the CAP strategic plans, is quite important. And then the third thing is the fourth thing is the participatory approach, which is again in the definition. And that's important, of course, that the plans are designed, for instance, if there is a plan with community members, that there is an ownership and it's not just one company benefiting, for instance, from Smart Villages support. But I think we have to be cautious here, and maybe more in the Eastern European countries where I'm coming from, because we see many fully depopulating communities. And sometimes it's, for instance, one leader or one leading figure who manages to change, the landscape or start to engage people more and more. We work with a community in Poland where there was I will talk about in a minute, but it's sometimes not that obvious to implement the participatory approach in the classical Western sense, because some communities are so much lagging behind and so much nobody left behind that there might be also other ways. But the key thing is that somehow, again, it impacts in the longer term on the community. So just very briefly, just to say, this a bit repeats the same one, so I skipped this one, sorry. But just to say, mention 3 communities, and again, you might have heard this from me if you listen to other presentations. This is a very small community of Stana. They are in the mountains, you can see in the Alps in northern Italy. And this has been a community that the main vision has been to turn around the depopulation trend. At some point, I think there were just 5 people left in the village, but it's a lovely village, and there was a mayor, and now there is another mayor, a young lady who took over a couple of years ago, who had this vision. They first worked with architecture and preserving the architecture, as you can see on the image, but then they really started to rebuild the community and really engage more and more people. So what's specific to them, that what I said about the vision, that they really work on many topics in an integrated way. So they have a quite complex vision, such as culture, environment, mobility, sustainable mobility in the Alps, youth engagement, tourism, and now they are actually starting a new program on newcomers. They actively work with the local community, and now actually they are, I think, some years ago when we started to work with them, they had more than 50 permanent inhabitants. I think they have close to 100, and they just reopened a new school in the community through these actions. And that's how they reversed the negative trend, and new kids are actually boarding in that village, and they are now engaging in this sustainable residency program. So in many, many ways, and in many of the actions, they are really modern. In the cultural things, they've got a very inspiring cultural center. This is the upper right image. But for instance, digital, this is a typical village where you really sense the social innovation, because they have so many creative new ideas, but digital or technological, I wouldn't say it's the core of it. So, of course, if we just took those villages who apply digital, then this village would be excluded. It's not necessarily all the different criteria that apply to each village. So this is another village in Austria, which we feature quite a lot. They are very, very inspiring, with a very dynamic and committed mayor, again, who have been elected some 5-10 years ago. So their vision was to really create, it's more on sustainable living and environmental aspects most recently. Again, the common thing is that they managed to save the local shop in a very innovative way. I can talk about it, but I don't want to go into too much detail. So they really local services. They had a very innovative housing project. You can see in the right side this image where elderly people live together with the young people. So one side is the youth, the other side is the elderly people, and it's a very modern home in the middle, small flats, a collection of small flats in the middle of the town. They want to work on sustainable tourism and so on. But recently, they really started to work in a very creative way on sustainable energy, and actually using a blockchain and local token system to do that. They engage the community, and really quite a big segment of the community, but they are more than 1,000 people, so probably it won't be possible, of course, to engage the whole community. And they have a lot of digital solutions, as I said, for instance, this blockchain in energy, but not all the smart solutions are actually digital. So, you know, it's much more about this integrated approach. And the third one I brought you is the one that I mentioned a minute ago. So this is a very committed guy in the middle of nowhere in Poland who decided to set up this regenerative agricultural farm, and he innovates with new technologies. He had this vision to build this regenerative agricultural model and sustainable food production, but at the same time to invest in the local community, which is still a very depopulated area. So it's a combination of this environmental but also social protection. There have been just 18 inhabitants, but he, for instance, created a lot of new local employment in the small village. And he keeps experimenting. So innovation is definitely there with new technologies and so on. But this is the typical case which I mentioned to you, that participatory, so the classical way, engaging these 18 members of the community in planning every action, it's not quite true, for instance, for this village. So you can see that somehow the smartness is in the whole process, and you can sense with these communities that they really know something that others don't. Probably the common in all that they act at the local community, it's a village in each case. They all have this vision and strategic approach that they combine different thematic areas. There is almost always someone to lead. So this leading figure is absolutely critical, or a visionary person in these cases. All of them, if you meet them, and I actually prepared a documentary film from two of these village leaders because they were so inspiring, but they are really open-minded and experiment each time with something new as well as creative. You can always feel that it's not just for the sake of getting another project or so, but they are really committed to what they are doing. Each aspect, in each of the village, sustainable development, environmental and social, is very, very key. And what we found in Smart Rural 21, that all of these villages very often feel neglected. So actually they feel that they don't get the right support, they don't get the EU funding. It's very hard to get funding, so they are kind of struggling. So unfortunately, this is a common topic for all. So I just wanted to show you with these few snapshot examples that it's not that easy to translate the definition, this formal smart rural definition, but you can still sense some common aspects in the villages that we considered smart in smart rural projects. So some lessons from this bit, and then I move to the last bit of my presentation. So it's not necessarily that, and of course, Pat was saying that there will be a focus on creating a definition in Ireland, but in certain ways it's not necessarily just a definitional issue. Maybe it's not that easy to have a more precise definition, and that's not what all these developments depend on. But it's quite important that in this period, especially, just like in the old time of Leader, we experiment. So we work with communities, we try to support them, you know, with these visions and identifying the right solutions. So it's probably not so much of time to start to create new definitions. You know, of course, its definitions are important to relate to, but it's not somehow the way forward at this stage. So I think it's very important that somehow we change our mindsets, and that's what we try to do, that to really care about these local communities at whichever level you operate at, to really support these local communities, to listen, to try to find the right resources for them, because many of them, I think, or that's what we experience, have very good strong potential to become smart villages. And then it's also somehow important to remain flexible, especially in the administration, because everybody is scared that the Commission doesn't know what they want. And in a certain ways, I have to say it's true. They don't quite know themselves either how to define smart villages. And then it might push the responsibility to managing authorities, let's say in the CAP strategic plan, that they should define what smart villages are. Then often smart villages don't, or managing authorities don't know, and then they push the responsibility further to leader legs, like let's implement it through leader, but without actually very clear guidance. And the legs might just expect local communities to do something and to present themselves or do something to be to be able to tick the box of smart villages. So somehow I keep saying in every project we do that all of us should take responsibility and seriously think of what you can do at your own level for the communities, and not to push the responsibility further down or up in this process, because we believe it's a very exciting experimental process. So this will be just a very quick run over through the tools that we developed, because it might be relevant for you in your own work. So as I said, I listed some of the villages, but we developed a number of tools in SmartRoad 21. So for instance, these are kind of methodological tools under the roadmap toolbox. Like how to help villages to get started, how to map the local context, how to engage stakeholders. So these are methods that we collected from those who worked with communities, including Pat and his team. So you can find a series of tools there. If you click on Smart Village Strategy, you can download all the strategies of the different communities we worked with, for instance. We have this specific tool also on how to design a strategy. There is a strategy template, although it might be too complex for some local contexts. You also, I wanted to show that, but it doesn't bring down the right drop-down menu. But under villages, you can visit every single village and see the journey they did with the project and the very specific outputs that we developed them. Maybe there will be a slide on that one as well. We had a smart solutions database where you get inspiration at the project level, and you can search by key topics as well. These are quite elaborated, including budget and so on, different solutions if you search the smart solutions database. This website is still live because we kept it live, although it was not an obligation, although the project finished a year ago. So we don't know how long the Commission will keep it live. We definitely will try to do it until the end of the year. And then it's a bit up to the European Commission to see what they do with it. So just to say that, yes, if you do the drop-down menu for the villages, you will see the individual village profiles as well and the very specific actions we supported. Now we are already on the SmartRoad 27 website where we had to do a database. It's under this heading Smart Communities, where you also find some lighthouse examples, some of the most inspiring communities, I think in a nice visual format and a shortened version of the documentary films, for instance, that I was talking about. But there is this database that we try to develop with a number of villages and their profiles. So it contains some basic information and how these key criteria translate into practice, each of them having some kind of strategy or plan, at least one smart solution. And of course, each of them are actually at the community local level. So you might want to check out other villages in different countries. These are the lighthouse site examples that I mentioned. And we really try to show the journey of the villages and what is inspiring about them. Within the page where there is a journey, there are some 10 projects listed with exact funding. So where did they get the funding from and how much? There is always a thematic focus like regenerative agriculture in Tomashin or renewable energy in Stans and what the villages do in there. And also how they engage the different segments of the community and how they worked with research. So these are our lighthouse examples that you can download from the site. Then we've got specific pages for the 2 knowledge clusters, and here you find this this roadmap kind of thing, where if you click on the different links, you also find the outcomes. It could be a presentation. This guy, Soren Hermansen, for instance, is extremely inspiring. They did this first energy island in Denmark, and he has a presentation on the website. And we are in the middle of still finalizing our CAP analysis, and this is a snapshot of that. In the CAP, you will see that there are 7 countries who actually introduced, and sometimes it's regions like in Spain, Galicia, they introduced dedicated smart villages interventions, which means that it's not only through LEADER, but actually they have in the CAP strategic plan a dedicated intervention. It's a very exciting area. Mostly these are cooperation interventions or infrastructural ones. So I think we need to watch out for these countries and see how far they get with their efforts to do something new, because they are the ones who started to experiment under the encouragement of the Commission. And then you see a number of other countries with more or less specifications within their CAP strategic plans who try to support it under LEADER, including Ireland. Sometimes we find very limited information in the CAP strategic plan. Countries, member states just knew they have to put it somewhere, and then they said, let's let LEADER to do it. So they put it under here, but they have no real image of how they would do it. And some other countries really started to put some more specific provisions and some guidance or support to LEADER legs how they should do it. For instance, this is one topic that we are planning to discuss at tomorrow's LEADER meeting, where the Polish task force will present what the LEADER guidance they are planning to develop on smart villages. So this is still work in progress. The report is not yet published, but each country will have a dedicated fact sheet, and it's a big analytical report to understand more what's happening in each member state. So I think it will be very useful to find references to other support frameworks across Europe. This section, and then in the last few minutes, I will just tell you 2 words about the Smart Village Network. But I would like to come back to the very first statement that we made, is that it would be very important somehow to keep in mind that smart villages was not only meant to be supported under the CAP. It's already great that it's being experimented with, and we see more and more financial support in that sense, especially through the dedicated interventions, because we also see that under LEADER there is not much additional funding because LEADER has to implement smart villages, but at least there are some dedicated interventions. But I think somehow it's our mission, and I think it should be everybody's mission, to try to mobilize other funding sources, and especially cohesion policy and bigger sources, or try to make sure that rural local communities are engaged in this kind of bigger projects directly and benefit from this mix of funding. And maybe partly it could be the legs who can open that tap and help communities not to care where the funding is coming from, but just somehow direct them to the right sources depending on their needs. So this is still a utopia. It's not quite what the picture is today, but this is where we are trying to get. So maybe the last 2 minutes, I just want to say you 2 words about the Smart Villages Network, but I put this image because I really have to change my hats here, and I have to stress that we are implementing as E40 the Smart Rural project in one capacity, and this other one, the Smart Village Network, is not an EU funded project. It's somehow a voluntary effort that we already started before, and actually Pat was involved and his company in that process at the time. So we started this network before the Smart Rural projects. Then, of course, we couldn't quite keep up with the workload in a way, but many of the activities built on that network, so we kept engaging with the networks. But while the projects I've been talking about are EU-funded formal EU projects, this one is a voluntary initiative of E40, if you'd like, but something we would really like to revive, because we really see the need from the local communities to get support, and we have worked and got inspired by many local communities. So this is the website that is still live, and we are, you can see under network the members, but we are kind of now rebuilding the network or getting in touch with members again. So this network is informal. We didn't want to set up something legal formation and general assemblies and all this, because we don't want to get just yet lost in administration. We just want to create a natural network of support. As I said, it was funded back in sometimes 2018, and we had 35+ members, but we lost a bit of contact because of the other project, but somehow starting to reshape this now. So those who are interested, more than welcome to follow up with us on this as well. The focus here is to really engage directly with communities, so kind of villages, towns, small rural villages, towns, if you'd like, and somehow give them a voice and space to act, so to support them in a number of things, to network with each other, to find each other for cooperation, to do projects jointly, and so on. But we also worked, and the initial membership contained quite a few legs, and also village associations. We want to keep that contact, although they are maybe not the primary target group of the network itself. So E40 is just the animator of that network, which we call Smart Village Network Services. We are trying to support this process right now out of voluntary work, but of course, hopefully, we joint work with the villages on different initiatives. We are also part of the Rural Pact coordination group, which is a great opportunity to be connected so somehow to the EU processes, because smart villages is really something that we believe we really contribute to the Rural Pact as well in policy terms. That's again somehow set in the wider policy context. So I know it's a lot, but that's kind of what I sought to share with you today. And sorry for the extensive amount of information. So this is the contact where you can reach us both for the project and for the network. So thanks a lot once more.
Dina, thank you so much. My God, there's a world and a mind of information there. It really is, from the Smart Village Network to the toolbox to Adina's utopia way of thinking and funding. There's just so much there is, and it's great to see Pat jumping in there as well in the middle of all of this. So we've had some great comments already. We've actually, somebody has joined us from South Africa, and we have other people who have been part of the Smart Village Network, people looking for the link for the seminar tomorrow. So we might maybe post that later or put that up. If we can put it in now, that would be even better. And again, people who have been involved. But if anybody at this stage would like to jump in, some great comments as well, Adina, and great congratulations on a great presentation so far. So if anybody would like to jump in with a comment, or else if you would like us to read a comment via what has been put up already, we'd be only happy to do so. Let's see, does anybody want to come in first of all? Yeah, I suppose there are most of the questions again. We have, I think, Smart Village Project in Tipperary, who are just completing there and who had a great experience within 3 villages. Elaine Cleary, Elaine, if you're there and you want to jump in to tell us a little bit about that, or ask Adina anything, please do. Again, more questions in and around the links in relation to further information, and yeah,
I think that's actually be really helpful for our villages. You know, we've taken them through this big long process over the last 2 years, and having something to follow up on, you know, is a big part of what we're kind of leaving them with, I suppose, at the end, is that it's an ongoing process, you know, something to come back to be evaluated, to be changing and evolving as the needs of the community do. So I think I'll be definitely looking through all your information as well to see where I can kind of pull out some of the information for the communities to say, like, you know, there's more to this than just your own community, and the case studies and that sort of thing is actually really interesting for them. Even though we've taken them through, it's kind of seeing it in action as well across Europe. You know, they're not alone in what they're doing, which is a really big part of the kind of the processes as well of going through all these that you know, we've done this in North Tipperary first. Sorry, in context, I work for the Technological University of Shannon. So I work in the Sustainable Research Development Institute. And so a lot of our projects are rural development based. And this was one that we kind of co-opted outside of our normal European projects to support kind of to keep a hand in, I suppose, in what's happening in the local area and the local community as well. Because a lot of the work that we do is development-based work. So we are able to bring in some of our knowledge into different communities then through other projects that we're doing. So it's a really good way for us to integrate and use our network and our skills to help other communities. So thank you for all the information that you presented today, because I know that this is going to be really, really helpful.
Thank you.
Great. Elaine, thanks a million. It's great to get that experience. William, if you'd like to pop in there, good to have you again. William, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, thanks, Maura. I should be well used to coming off mute now. Would you mind if I just ask Elaine a question about that project? I was struck, Elaine, by the fact that you're working with 3 villages. So I'm just wondering, first of all, are they geographically located close to one another?
So the funding came for South Tipperary. So the 3 villages are in South Tipperary.
Okay.
And they're probably within about, I would say, probably 15, 20 miles of each other.
Okay, and that's very interesting because, as you know, and I think it's been alluded to, that in Ireland, you know, the villages can be very small and the towns can be very small. Did you feel that it was actually a benefit in terms of making progress by involving 3 communities working together? You know, in a sense, sometimes you can see a better vision or a bigger vision by working with a cluster. But it's not something that we've traditionally done in Ireland. So I was just interested in your experience.
The way that we worked actually is we did a mixture of online and in-person events. So we did some online sessions where we delivered some content, and then they were able to discuss those contents in each of their community settings. And what they found very quickly was that they're all having similar challenges. So that kind of strengthened the conversation a little bit deeper as we went along. And then when we went out to doing one-to-one, we did one-to-one training with them as well. And brought them in and talked about their plans and talked about their visions. And then we brought them on community visits to other communities, and we brought them then as a group. And so then they had the chance to meet each other offline, in person, you know, and some for the first time in maybe 6 months. And so that then got them talking about what their villages were going through and the similar type of challenges with other communities as well, who had already gone a lots of planning and development and maybe got lots of funding and had done lots of projects. So we were bringing them to communities that previously we had worked with, maybe through the SDRI or through previous projects that we had that had been through processes. So they were starting to see kind of a pattern of what they were doing, and then taking them back and discussing it again. And so usually, like, you know, we had these great discussions about and that only came because the 3 villages, I suppose, realized very quickly that they all had the same challenges, pretty much. And rural Ireland, you know, there's, you know, rural mobility, social isolation, community facilities, lack of volunteerism, like these aging population, dereliction of buildings, lack of housing and social housing, and you know, and suddenly when you look at it, actually all 3 of them talking together, these are the same themes that come up, and we'll all know them because they're the same themes that come up across Europe.
Yeah.
So very good. There could be some important learnings there for the task force and indeed for government policy.
Well, we are having a little presentation night on the 13th of March, and I'm just, you know, and we're talking about, and we're going to have our villages presenting along. So our Smart Village planning was part of the program, also a biodiversity and a social climate action training as well was delivered through all this. So yeah, if anyone is interested, just like get in touch, no problem.
That's great, Elaine. Great, William. Thanks very much. Just before I call in Louise, again, Steve Dolan, Rural Development, again, an excellent presentation, Adina, and again, somebody who agrees with you in relation to direct funding for smart villages should, I suppose, have its own right of funding, particularly as Leader is increasingly overstretched in many areas. So if you want to come back on that, Adina, before we bring in Louise.
Yes, I mean, in terms of the direct funding, you mean, Maura?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I think. As I said, it's still an experiment. So I think we have to watch the 7 countries who have additional interventions. We also have to monitor. I mean, those who will be in the position to monitor what leader groups are doing, and which ones are included in their strategies and how they are supporting communities. What Ellen was saying, I think it's very interesting. Like, do you support individual communities or somehow the cooperation? And many of the things are actually implemented through cooperation interventions in other countries other than leader cooperation. So it's something very interesting which will emerge there. I think we still have a lot to do in terms of mobilizing other funding. So they are mostly not aware of the concept. So this is where we are trying to push the Commission as well. But somehow this is the direction from the Rural Pact. So we are just hoping that some will pick it up, because it would be absolutely crucial to get these sources as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Louise, you want to jump in there?
Just a quick one, yeah, probably on the same theme of the funding. Thank you, Dina. It was a wonderful presentation. I think a really important message is sometimes we think of smart and we think, as you say, it's straight away of technology. And I wonder, it's great that the message is getting out there that this isn't that. But what I really liked was the different examples you gave. Smart can tackle other issues like depopulation, or can be as broad as sustainable living, that it is different issues that gets addressed. But one thing you mentioned was they all have a huge social impact. And I wonder, is there a way in which we can measure that impact to show, well, actually it's worth the funding? Because, Europe and everyone likes to put a price on something. How many jobs did you create? But that social impact is still missing that measurement level. I just wonder, is that anything that you could pull out?
I think it's a very, very strong point, but I think it's also, I'm afraid to say that it's a bit unexplored area. Of course, when we worked with the villages, we looked at that, but it was such a small scale support and such a small period that it's not the Smart Rural 21 was more a networking than a direct support action. It didn't provide investment funding or anything that create this bigger impact. I mean, having said that, I think we should care about that, but I think you know much more than I do. So, for instance, in another project, the Horizon project we've been running, we were experimenting with the social return on investment exactly to somehow try to capture, the intangible value created. And I think to show the added value, it would be important to use methods like SROI in other areas as well. And I keep thinking the same, Louise, that you are saying, that somehow we should start to think already now how we will monitor the impact of these things, which are often hard to capture, but we ourselves haven't done in a very comprehensive way yet. So I can just agree with what you're saying.
Thanks for that, Adina. We let Pat in there before we wrap up.
Just a couple of quick points, just regarding what William is saying. I think it's very important, really. We're going to often think that smart villages can't really exist as islands. There's a whole benefit in that clustering piece, and there's so much work that they do replicate. And especially in Ireland, there's so many small villages, and people might go to Drama in one village, then go on the road to the GA, and vice versa. So they do naturally overlap. They're not just dictated by the speed limit boundaries. So there is that need for creating that network. Just to pick up on some of Louise's point regarding measurements as well, it's something that we kind of potentially starting to look at. It's only of use if every community uses the same measurement, then we can start comparing. So there's kind of top down where you can look at census data, but the really more interesting stuff is the bottom up metrics we can get from what projects are happening and so forth. But a part of the task force idea would be, could you define those or start the process of defining some of those metrics for comparability? So just picking up on a few points.
Great. Listen, thanks a million. We usually try and stick fairly well to time, and I think we've done that again this week. As always, first of all, thank you all for logging in. We are on our 20th seminar, and I think a couple of years ago, somebody suggested that a lot of the work that is being done is lost, and we have tried in some way here in Galway to try and prevent that from happening. So our idea is always to try and bring new research, new ideas, new ways of thinking from practitioners on the ground to researchers to super people like Adina, to anybody who wants to join us and listen. And hopefully we're doing that. We're doing a job in relation to that. But today, I think the wealth of knowledge that Adina has presented, I know Smart Villages is something that has captured the imagination across the island of Ireland, and I think it is really something that we can build on. It has ignited energy into the communities. It has really brought together different type of people who live in communities. But what Adina has shown us today, that some of the ways of thinking about this, some of the ways of igniting these communities is very similar across Europe. And I suppose sometimes we become very insular in our thinking, and we think that this is happening in Ireland, or we have these issues in Ireland. They actually have very similar issues across many, many rural villages and towns right across Europe. So tapping into what Adina has done, looking into her website, going on to into the toolbox that they have produced, we will undoubtedly follow and find some super solutions that will work really, really well for our Smart Villages ideas here in Ireland. So please do that. I cannot thank Adina enough, an absolute wonderful person who does a super and an unbelievable amount of work, because she absolutely believes in this, and she believes in it for many, many years. And I think that comes across in her presentation today. So thanks so much, Adina. It was, again, wonderful to connect with you. And thank you from all of the people who have logged on. Thanks again to all of you to log on. I think next month we already have Tara Farrell from the Longford Women's Link is going to present in relation to digitalization from projects that have been initiated by women in particularly. So please log on to us at the end of March for Tara Farrell's presentation, and we'll send out the link for that to everybody if we can. Again, Adina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Maura, do you want to stop recording?